I've been teaching for nearly 2 decades, long enough to know when a student is struggling and long enough to know when one is just different. I'm a tenured professor at a mid-sized university in Columbus. I teach upper-level media ethics and intro to communications, and I run a fairly tight classroom. I'm not the type to tolerate excuses or chase students down about late assignments. I give feedback where it's due, and I expect effort in return. It's not personal. It's just part of the job. Fall of 2020 was strange for everyone, for obvious reasons. We were still navigating hybrid learning, masks, distancing rules, trying to maintain something resembling normalcy. I had a student in my intro class, I'll call him Ryan, who stood out from day one. He always sat in the second row, never quite at the front, never quite in the back. Hoodie, black notebook, never a laptop. He wasn't disruptive. In fact, he never said much at all. But he was always watching. Not just listening, watching. His eyes never left me during lecture, and not in the typical bored student staring off kind of way. It was focused, intent. I noticed it, but I didn't feel uncomfortable. At least not at first. When midterms rolled around, he submitted a paper that was barely passable. Plagiarism check came up clean, but it was vague, shallow, and didn't meet the requirements. I marked it accordingly. The final wasn't any better. I gave him a D in the course. I assumed that would be the end of it. Students fail all the time. It's part of the cycle. A few days after grades were posted, I found a letter in my faculty mailbox. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten on lined notebook paper. Neat, careful cursive, not sloppy, but not practiced. It wasn't addressed to anyone, and it wasn't signed. It was just a passage. Word for word, something I'd said in lecture during week 3, about the media's role in framing moral responsibility. I recognized the phrasing immediately. It was one of those tangents I go off on unscripted, not on the slides, probably something I'd said without thinking twice. At first, I thought maybe it was someone being cheeky, a joke, or maybe a student pulling a quote they liked, so I just threw it out. The next week, there was another. Same handwriting, another quote. Again, something I had said aloud in class, not from the textbook, not from the slides, just me, my words. The third one hit me differently. It was a line I remembered saying during office hours, offhand, without a mic. I was talking to another student, not him, not the class. That's when I started to feel a little uneasy. I mentioned it casually to a colleague down the hall. She laughed and said, "You've got an admirer," and that was the end of the conversation. But it kept happening. I started locking my office more religiously. I stopped holding in-person office hours. I changed my routine slightly, got coffee from a different cafe on campus, parked in a different lot. I didn't really think I was being watched, but I just wanted to feel less visible. Then, about a month later, I came out to the parking garage and saw my car had been keyed. Driver's side. Deep, purposeful scratches. Not random. It looked like someone had taken their time. I filed a report with campus security. They were polite, but uninterested. Told me it could have been a student angry about a parking ticket. Suggested I park in a different area for a while. That's when I started to actually worry. Not panic, but I was no longer brushing it off. The same week, I noticed my office had been entered. I always keep things organized in a very specific way. Notebooks, syllabi, exam papers, everything in labeled folders. But that Thursday morning, my desk felt wrong. Nothing was missing, but things were ever so slightly shifted. A pen that was usually on the left was on the right. My chair was out of place. The little potted cactus on my windowsill was turned a different direction. I stared at that cactus for a full minute, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but I knew it wasn't nothing. I started keeping my door locked at all times, even while I was inside. One evening, as I was leaving late, I saw Ryan. standing at the far end of the hallway, a little shrouded in the dim yellow light of the emergency exit sign. I looked straight at him. He didn't look away. I didn't say a word, just turned and left. That weekend, I took all the letters I still had, along with a photo of the scratch on my car, and emailed the university's Title IX office. They thanked me for the info, said they'd look into it, but I never heard anything after that. Weeks passed. The semester ended. I taught my classes. I tried to move on. Then one morning in early spring, I passed a colleague's door and noticed her nameplate was gone. I stopped and asked around. "She's taking a leave," someone said vaguely. "Something with a student issue. Scary stuff." That night, I got a call from the department head asking if I could meet with someone from campus security the next morning. When I showed up, there were two people waiting, the head of security and someone from campus legal. They said they wanted to talk to me about a student, Ryan. He'd been arrested the night before for stalking a faculty member. The same professor whose nameplate had been removed. According to the report, he had been sitting outside her home in his car every night for weeks. They found pages of notes, maps, drawings, surveillance logs, photos. Then the head of security pulled out a folder and slid it toward me. Inside were more pages. Notes in the same handwriting I'd seen on those letters. Diagrams of my office, my schedule, notes on the things I wore, what I said in class. One entry dated back to the second week of the semester read, "Monday, blue blazer, stays 45 minutes after class, buys coffee on Neil Ave." My hands went cold as I flipped another page. She turns off the lights in her office, but leaves the lamp on. Likes peppermint tea. I couldn't remember ever mentioning peppermint tea in class, but I kept it in a tin in my bottom drawer. The security officer looked at me and said quietly, "We think you were the first, but not the last." They believed he had moved on from me when I started changing routines, when I stopped being visible, when I stopped being accessible. It wasn't comfort, it was luck. I asked if there would be charges filed. They said yes, for the other professor. They couldn't prove anything with me. No direct threats, no emails, no physical contact. The letters were ambiguous. The scratched car was unconfirmed. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just thanked them for their time and walked out. I finished the semester virtually. That summer, I transferred to a different campus across the state. Smaller department, fewer students, a door with a deadbolt. Sometimes I still think about how long he was watching me before I noticed, how many things he might have seen, how close he was, even when I thought I was alone. I always thought I'd recognize danger, but I never saw it because he never wanted to be seen. The breakup just kind of happened. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic fights, no accusations or cheating. We just stopped fitting. You know, like puzzle pieces that used to align perfectly, but over time got warped. I was the one who ended it. He didn't yell, didn't cry. He just nodded, said he understood, that he wanted me to be happy. But what came after didn't feel like understanding. For weeks, he sent these long, drawn-out texts. Not angry ones. Guilt-soaked. "You gave up on us too fast. I still think about that night in Asheville," or "I just hope you're sleeping okay." I stopped replying after the third one. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just needed space. Eventually, the messages stopped. I moved out of the apartment we shared a month later, found a small one-bedroom unit closer to the school where I worked, top floor of a brick walk-up with warped windows and old radiator pipes. Not perfect, but it was mine. I bought a couch, painted the kitchen, reclaimed little pieces of my life, and for a while, things felt quiet, still. But then it started. I'd come home from work and find the lights on when I swore I'd turned them off that morning. My keys weren't in their usual spot. My toothbrush felt damp, like it had just been used. I figured I was tired, distracted, adjusting. But then I started locking the door more obsessively. I'd double-check it before bed, just to reassure myself. Still, I'd wake up and find it unlocked. I changed the locks and I told myself that would fix everything. It didn't. Some nights when I stayed late grading papers, I'd come home and smell cologne in the hallway. The same kind he used to wear. Woodsy, a little sharp, with this note of something chemical underneath. I told myself someone else on the floor probably wore it. But I knew it. My body recognized it before my brain did. I didn't tell anyone. I figured no one would believe me anyway, so I didn't bother. I worked with teenagers. I knew what trauma responses looked like. I kept asking myself, am I projecting? Am I being irrational? Then came the night I heard footsteps. It was past 4 a.m. I had just shut off the TV and was drifting off when I heard soft creaking, floorboards shifting near the kitchen. Not loud, not rushed, just steady movement. I sat up in bed and held my breath. Nothing. I got up, walked out barefoot, turned on every light, checked the closets and under the bed. The front door was locked, windows closed. No sign of anything. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Still, I didn't call anyone. I didn't report anything. What would I even say? I started leaving the TV on. The sound made me feel less alone. I put bells on the front door so I could hear it open, even a little. Then, this part still makes my skin crawl. I went to change the batteries in my smoke detector. Just something on my weekend to-do list. I got the chair, climbed up, unscrewed the cap. It felt heavy. Heavier than it should have. I took it down, opened the casing, and inside, behind the battery compartment, was a small black object with a tiny blinking light. A camera. Not one of those fake ones you buy online as a prank. A real one. Wireless. Battery powered, with a micro SD card in the side, and a tiny pinhole lens pointed straight down. It had been watching me. I don't remember getting off the chair. I don't remember setting the smoke detector down. I think I stood in the middle of my kitchen for 5 full minutes before my body remembered how to move. I packed a bag, laptop, charger, toothbrush, whatever I could grab. Then I drove to my sister's place across town. It was almost 1 a.m. when I showed up on her doorstep. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask anything, just said, "Come in." The next morning, we went to the police. They took the camera and took my statement. The officer handling it was calm and respectful, told me I did the right thing by leaving. 2 days later, they called me back in. They had searched my ex's laptop. He had folders, footage of me in my apartment, eating, brushing my teeth, watching TV, sleeping. There were no videos of him inside, but the timestamps of the first recording on each camera matched gaps in my schedule. Days I stayed late at work, nights I went to visit friends. They searched my place again. Found a second camera hidden inside the vent cover above my bed. That one was off, battery drained. He had made a copy of my apartment key. I sat in that tiny police station office, staring at a manila folder with my life inside of it. Every time I blinked, I remembered how small the blinking light was, how often he must have checked the footage. He was arrested the same day, charged with unlawful surveillance and stalking. I got a restraining order granted almost immediately. The worst part was how calm he was about all of it. Didn't deny anything, didn't apologize, just sat there like he couldn't understand what the problem was. I moved out the following month, found a place with gated entry and a concierge desk, changed my number, new job, new locks, new life. I still double-check every vent, every smoke detector, every blinking light. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear footsteps again, but it's always just the building settling. or that's what I tell myself. He never yelled, never threatened, never touched me. He just watched. And no matter what anyone says, that was more than enough. It wasn't about love, it was about control. And he only stopped when he knew he'd lost it. After my breakup, I didn't want to wallow. I wanted to feel stronger physically and emotionally. So I signed up for a gym. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those mid-range chain gyms near my office, close enough to squeeze in a workout before or after work. I started with 3 days a week, mostly cardio and a few machines. At some point, I figured I'd hit a plateau and maybe need help learning proper weight training. That's when I met Kyle. He was one of the floor trainers. Early 30s, fit in the way you'd expect a trainer to be. Confident, friendly, and never pushy. I asked him a quick question about adjusting the cable machine, and he showed me a whole routine. We talked easily. He had that effortless kind of charm that made you feel like you'd known him longer than you had. He offered a free one-on-one session. I said, sure. I figured it was just part of his job. The session went well. We joked around, talked music. He had good energy, didn't hover. When we finished, he said, "You're fun to train. Want to grab a smoothie sometime?" I told him thanks, but I wasn't really looking to date right now. He took it well. Or seemed to. Said no problem, smiled, and walked off. I thought that was it. But the next few weeks felt different. Every time I showed up, he was there. Always at the front. Always in between clients. Always ready with a comment. "Back again? You're committed." Or, "That top's a good color on you." Still friendly, still polite. But there was a shift in the way he lingered. He always seemed to find a reason to be nearby. Then I started seeing him outside the gym. The first time, I ran into him at the Trader Joe's near my place. I chalked it up to coincidence. But then it happened again. This time at the gas station across from my office. He waved like it was totally normal. "Small world," he said. But San Diego isn't small, and these weren't places anywhere near the gym. A week later, I was walking to my car after work and spotted him across the street, leaning against a lamppost like he was waiting for someone. He didn't wave that time, just stared until I drove away. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. He hadn't done anything, maybe he just lived nearby. But then he started liking my old Instagram posts. Not just recent ones, posts from years ago. Random photos from 2018. A picture of my dog I'd forgotten I even uploaded. I set my profile to private, blocked him. A few days later, I walked out to my car before work and saw a note tucked under my windshield wiper. "Looking good this week." That's all it said. No name, but I knew. I parked 2 blocks away for the rest of the week. One night, I went to dinner with friends. We ate outside near the beach. When I got home, I found a small folded napkin on my front steps, just a plain diner napkin. Nothing on it, no writing. Thing is, it was from a place I'd once said was my favorite. I told a friend and she said, "You should say something to the gym." So I did. I spoke to the manager and explained everything. The comments, the pop-ins, the note. She looked concerned and said she'd talk to him. I never saw him at the gym again after that. His name was removed from the trainer board the next week. It should have felt like a win, like it was over. So when I filed a restraining order the following day, it felt excessive, but necessary. The paperwork went through fast. The court agreed there was enough pattern to justify it, and he was served the same week. And then he was gone. No run-ins, no messages, nothing. For 6 months, I started to breathe again. The gym felt normal. I started going back in the mornings, took a trip to visit my sister, even adopted a cat. but the order had an expiration date. I marked it in my calendar, just to be aware. It expired on a Friday. Saturday morning, I got up, fed the cat, opened the front door to get some air, and nearly stepped on a bouquet of flowers. Roses wrapped in butcher paper, no card. I froze. I hadn't told anyone the restraining order expired. I went straight to my laptop and pulled up the security cam footage. I'd had a camera installed above the door the week after I filed the report. I barely looked at it after those first few months. It became part of the background. But that morning, I sat down and scrubbed through the timeline. 3:12 a.m. The footage showed someone approaching. He stood at the edge of the porch for a second, looked around, and then stepped forward and placed the flowers gently at the door. He didn't knock, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching, for nearly a full minute. Then he turned and walked off into the dark. It was him. The next day, I renewed the order. And the day after that, I packed up my apartment, found a new place across town, different complex, new locks, and different route to work. I haven't seen him since. He never broke in, never shouted, never made threats. He was just always there. And that was enough to ruin my peace completely. When you work in a bar, you get used to people. Loud ones, creepy ones, regulars who think you're their therapist after 2 shots of whiskey. I've dealt with all of it. You learn to smile when you don't want to move fast, to let things roll off. But there are certain kinds of people, quiet ones, who don't seem like a problem until it's too late to fix it. I was 28 and working nights at a spot just outside downtown San Antonio. Decent place. Mostly regulars, late night music, decent tips. Fridays and Saturdays were chaos, but during the week, you could almost relax into the flow of things. Drunks came in, spilled their feelings, then left. It was all background noise after a while. There was this guy, late 30s maybe, who used to sit at the end of the bar every Tuesday and Thursday, always alone. He always ordered the same thing, a Lone Star and a shot of Jameson. Never overdrank, never got loud, always tipped 20% no matter what. I didn't even know his name. He didn't offer it, and I never asked. To me, he was just another stool in the lineup. He'd watch the room but rarely talk. Occasionally, he'd ask how busy we were or comment on the weather. Nothing weird. If you'd asked me back then if I ever felt uncomfortable around him, I'd have said no. I thought of him as furniture, harmless and always there. But he started staying later. At first, it didn't register. He just didn't leave when the rest of the crowd did. He'd linger at the bar while I was cashing out tabs and wiping things down. Sometimes he'd offer to help carry a case of beer or stack chairs. "Don't worry, I'm just trying to be helpful," he'd say, smiling like it was no big deal. One night he asked, "You always walk to your car alone?" I shrugged it off. "It's not far." "Still," he said, "might not be safe. This area gets weird at night." I nodded and went back to closing duties. Didn't think much of it. Guys at the bar say stuff like that all the time. Some sincere, some with a bit of an edge. I figured he was just trying to make conversation. Then came the questions. Not all at once, spread out over the next few weeks. "You live far? You usually park out back? You always work the Thursday shift? You live alone?" That one made me pause. I didn't answer, just gave him a polite smile and moved on. He never pushed it, but he never really let up either. Always there, always watching, and always polite. One Thursday, I stayed late to restock. He was still there, leaning on the counter like he had nowhere else to be. I told him we were closing. He nodded, stood, and walked out without another word. A few minutes later, as I was wheeling the trash out to the back alley, when I heard a whistle. Not a cat call, more like someone trying to get my attention. I stepped outside. The alley was empty. I checked the lot. Nothing. I told myself it was just a random noise, maybe a drunk walking by. The next Tuesday, he was back in his seat, like nothing happened. I kept my answers short and avoided eye contact. That weekend, I had both nights off. I was home late Sunday evening, getting ready to crash, when I stepped outside to bring in a package and saw a 6-pack of Shiner Bock sitting neatly on my porch. There was a folded note taped to the top. "You look tired tonight. Thought you could use these." My throat went dry. That was my favorite beer, one I'd mentioned once in passing to another regular weeks ago. I didn't recognize the handwriting. There was no name, no indication of who left it. But I knew exactly who it was. The problem is, I never told that man where I lived. The next night at work, I couldn't focus. I kept checking the door, waiting for him to walk in. And he surely did, right on schedule. Sat in his usual spot and nodded at me. I pretended not to see him. He didn't order anything for 20 minutes, just sat there, watching me. When he finally did speak, all he said was, "Rough weekend?" I don't remember what I said back. I think I smiled, maybe nodded, maybe nothing. After my shift, I went straight to my manager. "Something weird is going on," I told him. I explained the beer, the note, the questions. Everything. He frowned but didn't look shocked. "Yeah, he's kind of intense," he said, "but he tips well. I don't think he means anything by it." That was it. That was his whole response. So I started carrying a kitchen knife in my purse. Just a paring knife. Small, but enough to hold if I needed to. I filed a police report the next day, told them what happened. They took my statement, nodded along, and said unless he threatened me or tried to break in, there wasn't much they could do. "He hasn't done anything illegal," the officer said. "Just weird." Weird, that's all it was to them. 2 weeks later, I worked my last shift. It was a Tuesday. I was behind the bar restocking lime wedges when I looked through the front window and saw him, sitting in his car, not parked at the bar but across the street, engine running, lights off, just watching. That was it for me. I told my manager I was done. No notice, no second thoughts. I never saw him again after that. Never found out his name. I blocked out his face so hard I don't even know if I'd recognize him today. But I still think about the silence of the alley, the whistle, the beer on my porch, and the note. "You looked tired tonight." He was close enough to see that, close enough to know, close enough to leave something at my front door, and no one thought it was a big deal. That's what scared me most. If any of these stalker stories got under your skin, hit that like button and send this video to someone who loves true horror. Have a creepy experience of your own? Drop it in the comments or shoot me an email. I'm reading every single one. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's creeping up next. Stay cautious and stay safe. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.